And don't be afraid of asking stuff. The weirdest question I ever got was, do you shave your own head? That was in Richmond 3 nights ago or something like that. I was like, well, yeah. Did I do it wrong? Because she asked it with a tone of pity. You shave your own head. So, yeah. So you guys can't do worse than that. So feel free to ask me whatever you'd like. I'm kind of excited about your questions. Yes, it developed. Yeah, it developed after I just got a contract for 3 books. That's kind of what they tend to do. They'll give you a 3-book contract or a 2-book contract and see if it sells. It's like, throwing the pickle against the window to see if it sticks. That's their sales method. Because they never really know what's going to be popular, right? They can guess, but they're not sure. So they gave you the 3-book contract, and then they waited to see how the sales numbers came in. And once they were confident that I'd continue to have some folks buy the books if I wrote more, they gave me another contract. Well, and they were really confident because, thanks to you guys, Tricked hit New York Times. So once that happened, I knew I would be able to go ahead and finish my series. So that's when I really planned out the rest of the series. I had always wanted to do 9 because 9 is a really important number in Irish mythology, and I figured a character from that culture would tell his own story in 9 books, and then I just cheated and told more stories. There's 9 novels, but there's these novellas and these short stories and stuff. Yeah, so that's how I got around that. But there's 9 novels for sure. So yeah, great question. Thank you. Yes. Partially, it is online, but then I always try to confirm with real folks who actually know what they're talking about. Like talk, one-on-one with them.
Like Miss Simone.
Yes, like Miss Simone, exactly. Because if you just do online research for that kind of thing, you're gonna go wrong. So yeah, that's a rabbit hole, as they say. But like for
the questions before you answer. People who ask questions up here.
Thank you.
Be heard by people in the back.
I appreciate it. The question was the research process, right? What do you follow? And I do some online stuff, but then confirm, especially when it comes to different faiths and so on, I confirm with folks that I can actually speak with. So in the case of Tricked and the depiction of Coyote and so on, I had a student who was of the Navajo Nation. She also let me speak to her parents and her grandparents about how that was being portrayed and how he would behave. And I've since gotten some emails from folks from the Navajo Nation like, how do you know this? And then B, I liked how you depicted us, So I try to be, respectful of everybody on the floor. The rest of it, like the Hindu stuff in Shattered, I actually just accidentally wound up being sat next to a woman with, bindi mark on her forehead on a plane from Minneapolis to Pittsburgh. And I'm like, hi. I notice you are Hindu, and do you mind if I ask you a few questions? We had the best conversation from Minneapolis to Pittsburgh, and she helped me out a whole lot with, what are Rakshasas and how do they manifest and what do they think they are and so on and so forth. So that kind of a thing is super helpful when you can actually talk to some folks, and if I don't talk to them, I probably am not going to use them. I went to Taiwan in February, and so I got, my editors in Taiwan said, have you read The Journey to the West? Nope. It's fantastic. There's this guy, and he's the Monkey King. I was like, this is so cool. So I have Granuel going to Taiwan in the last book. And she meets the Monkey King, and it's so much fun. I'm having a great time with it.
You should mention, too, about how all the places are real. That part of the research, that all the places they go.
All the places, all the locations in my novel are real. Rula Bula does exist, and it has the greatest fish and chips. I'm not lying. I still have not found better fish and chips than Rula Bula. They have replicas of Fragara and Moralta hanging above their bar now. And you can go there, and you can actually see, if you take Hammered with you and look at that, the chapter where Jesus has a shot with Atticus, and the hammers of God come in, you can actually see how I've described it, just the way the bar is actually laid out. That whole thing all that's real. The only location that's not real in the books is the Double Dog Dare Cafe in Tricked. I made that one up. That cannot exist in the United States due to legal reasons. You can't really order food for somebody and not expect to be sued. Especially, if it might cause them to vomit or die, or if have an allergic reaction, that would be bad. So everything else, though, is real. So, I went to Poland and I went to Berlin and I've gone to Rome. That was fun. Because I had to get a personal guide, because my goal was to figure out where the vampires lived in Rome. It's not your typical tour. I actually, so this lady, she was just top notch. I totally recommend her, and I gave her a shout out in the acknowledgments of state. She's an archaeologist. So she's like, yes, this is Rome on top, and here's what's lying, 8 levels beneath it. She knows all the stuff. It's fantastic. But she calls me up from Italy. So, what do you want to see? You want to see the Vatican, right? And I'm like, no, the vampires aren't there. She's like, what? and then she thought I was joking with her at first, and then she realized I was serious, and then she actually had a little bit of moral worries about this, because she's a very good Catholic. I was like, is this evil? So she had to work through that. And then once she figured out this is fine, she was so excited. She's like, this is the weirdest tour ever, and I love it. So we did eventually wind up picking a spot, in terms of just, it worked out that the Spanish Steps in Rome were where I would, where I wound up setting everything. For the vampires, because they have these Dolce & Gabbana and all these really high-end retail on the bottom floor, and above it are all these flats or apartments that go for over €1 million each. They're super expensive now, but back when Keats and Shelley were living there, a couple hundred years ago, they called it the English ghetto, because it was such a poor, rundown area that, random English poets could afford to live there. So now it's like some of the most expensive real estate there is. And I figured that's where there's so many tourists around there. I figured it would be a great place for vampires to live in a show-off fashion, but also just snatch people, and nobody would ever know they were gone, because it's Rome. It's busy. So other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah, there are some. Off the top of my head right now, I might be missing him because I'm focused on the Kodiak thing. In The Squirrel on the Train, we meet Suluk Black.
Oh, okay.
That's Kodiak Black's daughter. And she is going to give you quite a bit of backstory about him and her. And that, I'm trying to, I don't like to wrap up everything, because I think that's like, then you get to the Lord of the Rings thing that I was mentioning, right? But I do like to wrap up quite a bit of stuff, and so, I did want to get into Kodiak Black and his daughter a little bit, and what's going on with them. Basically, a lot of folks are not aware that, most of the natives of North America were wiped out by English or French or, Spanish. But up in the Aleutians, that was Russians who really destroyed their culture, Russian trappers. And so that's where they are from, the Aleutian Islands, and where the Kodiaks actually come from. So there you go. That's so you get more in The Squirrel on the Train.
Awesome.
What was my journey for being published? Well, I walked 5,000 miles. 5,000 more. All right, so it was a long journey. When I was an undergrad at NAU, I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, finally, and I was kind of blown away by what Ken Kesey did there with Chief Bromden's voice. If you've only seen the movie of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you're unaware that Chief is the narrator of the book. And what Kesey did there was, he really is mentally ill at the beginning of the novel, and as he heals, his language improves throughout the book. And I just thought, whoa, dude, that's incredible what you did there, and I wanted to do that. And that's what made me want to become a writer, was that particular novel. So I've been writing since age 19, but mostly very badly. And I didn't get anything done for a long time. When I finally got something done, it was terrible and will never be published. But it was vital for me to complete it, because it taught me that I could actually finish a book. Once you have that confidence that you could finish, it goes faster. So that book took me 6 years. remember I was writing full-time too and not knowing what I was doing. And I had the arrogance of an English teacher who thought, well, I can teach English, so of course I can write a novel. I know what I'm doing. So I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I wrote that book. And then my second one, which was the very early draft of A Plague of Giants, that took me 3 years instead of 6, and it was twice as long. So that having that confidence is such a huge thing. Just finishing a book is, if you finish a novel, you have, already surpassed 99% of humanity who says, "Oh, I do it if I have the time," but they never do. So, yeah, please just finish your book and then get better after that. Brandon Sanderson wrote 9 novels before he was first published. So Hounded was my third. After I wrote that Plague of Giants thing, that took me 3 years. Hounded took me 11 months. So, and then Hexed, the second book, that took me 5. You get better. So don't put a lot of, if you're trying to write, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself that I've got to get this first one published. Think of it as training wheels. You're going to fall down, you're going to scrape your knees, but you're going to be better afterward. It's part of your journey, and you've just got to get there. You've got to put in the time. So once I wrote Hounded, I actually did not, I wrote it for my own entertainment. I wrote it just for fun. It's just a mashup of stuff I like. I love mythology. I love Shakespeare. I love making jokes about pop culture and about teaching. So all of that stuff got kind of, and I love dogs, by the way. So I put all of that in there, and then I wound up thinking I wasn't even going to send it out. And my wife said, "No, you will, because this is better than a lot of stuff that I read." So I did. I got an agent with it, and he sold it in 2 weeks. I was like blown away that could even happen. It actually went to auction. I had 4 different publishers who wanted to publish it, and I had the luxury of picking my publisher. And so that was fantastic. I went with Del Rey, and obviously it's worked out great. But every writer's journey is different, and they're all valid. It's just all about writing a good story that some publisher somewhere thinks is going to sell. And there is an element of luck to it. You got to hit the market at the right time with the right story. But I was kind of at the end of the urban fantasy boom, but I was also not writing the same thing as everybody else was, because everybody else was writing vampires and werewolves shagging, and I was just writing about, I was the only guy writing about a druid, and writing about a certain, those pantheons the way I was doing it. So that helped me stand out from the crowd, and then it turned out that a lot of other folks geek out about the same things I geek out. Well, I was, for Christian folks, I was taking a subtle dig in the fact that, I'm sorry, white Jesus was not a thing. Sorry. Okay, he was, in fact, the very first images of Jesus are out of Ethiopia. And, you've got the black Jesus down there. They were the first folks that really, kind of hardcore converted to the faith. And they were much closer to, the historical Jesus at the time when they were doing that. So, anyway, that was part of it. I really enjoyed the second version. I put a joke in there that hardly anybody probably got. Did you guys, in Shattered, I hope I'm not spoiling too much, but in Shattered, Jesus shows up and he pulls tequila out of his pocket. Did you guys?
Yeah.
Do you guys, anybody speak Spanish here and get the joke? No? Okay. All right, so here we go. My Spanish joke. I grew up in Arizona, so these are, there's a tequila called Milagro. If you go down here to Felipe's, you can order it in your margarita. They have it. I saw it. I was there. So, Milagro means miracle in Spanish. So Jesus was pulling a miracle out of his pocket. I've got stupid puns like that all over the place in the series, and every so often somebody will email me and say, "I saw what you did there." I'm like, yes. So I love it when those things happen, when people recognize what I'm doing, especially from like teachers who get my education jokes. So Hexed is full of those. So anyway, to get to your question about why did I depict Mary the way I did?
Any of the gods
Well, that was consistent with the world building, the idea that believers are the ones whose faith basically allows the gods to manifest. And so for somebody like Jesus, for example, he's got a lot of believers from different cultures. It's kind of suddenly I have to fly. From a lot of different cultures, and so it was a little bit of a juxtaposition or a flipping of that idea of man created in his own image. I flipped that around and said, well, here's Jesus manifesting in the image that the believer imagines him. So that's kind of what I was doing with that. I don't remember. Do you mean like that magic system where they're bound to the earth and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, how they talk to each other.
Yeah, it was just me trying to figure out a consistent magic system for what Druids do, because of course what's written down about Druids is all just sort of made up. We have a certain archaeological record, but we actually have no true written record of what they believed. Everything we have written down about them from folks at the time were all people who hated the Druids. You can't trust the Christian accounts. You can't trust Caesar's accounts. The one thing I did take from Caesar's account of the Druids that I thought he wasn't going to mess around with was the training period. He said that they got trained. It was Caesar who said that Druids had a 12-year training period. So I took that from Caesar because I thought, well, there's no political motivation for him to make up that number, right? I thought that was at least accurate, okay, about the way Druids did things. So just a basic fact, but a lot of other things I kind of doubt. You know, what is he doing here? He's really trying to justify his war, you know, when he's writing this down. In the way he treats these folks on the continent, you know, he's justifying his conquering of them. So I didn't want to trust everything he said or anything of whatever anybody said, because I just had to take little pieces that seemed to be consistent, because everybody had an agenda, right? So what you saw from a Greek account and a Roman account and some other folks was that Druids supposedly could shapeshift. They supposedly could affect the weather. They could, they had, you know, an intense connection with animals. All of those things seem to be consistent across different accounts. And so I kept the stuff that seemed to be verified, I guess, independently from different folks, if that makes sense. No, I stopped. Honestly, this is actually a thing where I really cannot handle personally. This is just me, my personal taste as a reader and as a watcher of television or movies or anything. I can't handle violence against women. I just turn it off, or I put the book down. I'm done. So I wind up. I haven't watched Game of Thrones or read it in a while. So I understand that. It is obviously a thing that needs to be dealt with and so on, and it can be done well, but I don't want to handle it, and it's not in my fiction. Plague of Giants has nothing like that. I actually kind of think if you're going to be a speculative fiction author, why don't you speculate about a world that's better than ours?